My name is Allison Spell, and today we're going to be starting a series called Let's Talk About. I teach 10th grade U.S. history, I teach 11th grade AP United States history, and I also teach 12th grade government and politics. So today we're going to be talking about something from Unit 3 of AP U.S. history, and it's going to be Marbury v. Madison. Very important. Now, you may be asking me, why do we need to learn about Marbury v. Madison? And you may be tempted to skip over it. I mean, it does occur in 1803. But you're going to want to not do that because it appears all throughout U.S. history, in AP government and politics. Anytime the Supreme Court's involved, you're going to want to know about Marbury v. Madison because it establishes basically what the Supreme Court does. It establishes the principle of judicial review. Before this, it of course had powers outlined in the Constitution, but this is when the Supreme Court really gets its chops. Judicial review is just basically the concept that as the Supreme Court, they could decide that laws were unconstitutional, that actions of the president are unconstitutional or constitutional, either way. Could be positive, could be negative. Later on, actions of people, unconstitutional or constitutional, and it's going to define the limits of the Constitution in terms of like Bill of Rights, different things like that. There are lots of different cases that are important, but Marbury v. Madison, judicial review, very important. So we have a cast of characters. The first one is John Adams, boo, everyone hates him, he's terrible, XYZ, alien sedition, no one likes him, he's a Federalist, enough said, right? And then another person involved in this case is going to be William Marbury. He wants to be a justice of the peace, super exciting. He's prepared his whole life, very fun. And then we've also got incoming president with the election of 1800, Thomas Jefferson. You may know him from the Declaration of Independence, kind of cutting things out of the Bible, all those fun things. He is basically a Democratic Republican. He doesn't like anything John Adams does, which I mean, who did? But then he also has his little right-hand man, his little lapdog, James Madison, and he is his Secretary of State. Basically what happens is this. John Adams is on his way out. He's basically done kind of with the whole presidency thing, but he kind of wants to stick it to him because, Thomas Jefferson's coming in and he's a Democratic Republican and he's a Federalist. So basically what he says is, I'm going to appoint these people called midnight judges. And what they're going to be is it's going to be kind of pushes into the Supreme Court and people aren't even going to know because I'm going to do it at midnight. Not really midnight, but the end of his presidency. So William Marbury is one of these people that is appointed, and he's just sitting in his house and he's waiting on his commission, which is basically a piece of paper in 1803, 1800s that basically says, hey, you got the job. Cool, right? So he's waiting on that. Meanwhile, Thomas Jefferson's kind of holding on to it. And finally, he's like, you know what? I don't really like John Adams, and I don't really know William Marbury, so I'm not going to deliver this. So he says to James Madison, he says, you are not going to deliver this commission. James Madison's like, cool, bro. I never liked the Federalists anyway. And so basically after that, William Marbury's like, I've literally waited for this piece of paper my whole life. Where is it? So he says, I'm going to sue you at the Supreme Court level. Super fine. So he sues him. That's why it's called Marbury v. Madison. And the Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice John Marshall, who is also Jefferson's cousin, is kind of in a bind. You may think because he was cousins with Jefferson that he liked him. That's not the case. They didn't really get along. He didn't like that Jefferson was a Democratic Republican. And so anytime that he kind of got a chance, he would stick it to him, right? But he also didn't think that what John Adams did was constitutional. So basically what happens is he's kind of got to answer 3 questions. And how he answers these questions is going to be pivotal to the nation's future. So the first question he has to answer is, does Marbury have the right to receive his commission? Like, does Madison need to give it to him? Like, does he have a right? The second question is, does Marbury have the right to sue in the Supreme Court? And the third question is, does the Supreme Court have the right to order Madison to deliver commission to Marbury? Now, the answer to these questions are very important, and it's going to kind of establish a compromise that's going to result in judicial review. So to the first question, he says, yes, Marbury does have the right to receive his commission. He's kind of a good bro. We like him. Super cool. It's constitutional. All that. Awesome. Second question, does Marbury have the right to sue Madison at the Supreme Court level? And they say, no. And it's going to kind of have to do with the, Judicial Act of 1789. Then the third question, does the Supreme Court have the right to order Madison to deliver commission to Marbury? And what they say is super complicated, but it's what establishes judicial review. They say, technically, we could issue a writ of mandamus, which basically would just say, hey, you need to deliver that commission. But they say a writ of mandamus would only be legal under the Judiciary Act of 1789. And they decide in this Supreme Court case that the Judiciary Act of 1789 is not actually constitutional. So they say, because of the Judiciary Act of 1789 not being constitutional, we actually are not required to order a writ of mandamus. We don't have to require you to submit the commission. And we're going to say, basically, we could order this, but because we think the Judiciary Act of 1789 is unconstitutional, we're not gonna. So basically, they decide that for the first time, something is not constitutional, which is just, in practice, judicial review. So they kind of came to a compromise over that. So if you don't take anything else away from this, it's basically that Marbury v. Madison is very, very important. It establishes judicial review. It also frowns on John Adams like one more time, which is hilarious. And then also we've got just a super smug answer from John Marshall. So there you go. That's Marbury v. Madison.